Well, do you still want to talk about the Matrix, or should we wait until like we have more time and Matt, or should we just? Oh wait, look, there's Matt. Speaking of whom,
you officially start?
No, Chuck just now logged in, so I am broadcasting though. So
okay, because I'm totally using our podcast for my own personal gain for just a second.
Okay.
Because I have no voice, as we know, and I'm hoping to come back later, but I'm going to make some people's day. Does this camera turn? Oh, nice. I'm going to make some people's day and make them temporary YouTube stars.
Okay.
You guys are going to help me out.
All right.
Because they're going to say hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi, Bella.
Hi.
And they want to see themselves on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Well, we could definitely make that. Hi, Bon. How you doing?
Say, this is going to be on YouTube.
What?
Can you say hi to all the people on YouTube?
Hi.
Can you tell them to like and subscribe and ring the bell?
Like and subscribe and ring the bell.
Oh, good job. All right, what are you guys talking about today?
Today we are talking about The Matrix. We are approaching the 20th anniversary, and now is a good time to talk about a movie that changed the landscape of science fiction and action cinema.
We've actually passed the 20th anniversary. It was this. I mean, as of our recording, it was this past weekend.
Oh, I thought it was like the 30th or something.
I'll double check.
Okay. All right. Well,
Father Chuck, king of actuallying us on the podcast.
It's true. It's true. Oh, you're right. March 31st. Okay.
All
right, guys. Well, I'm going to let you guys get going on the thing, and I'm going to hopefully join in later and catch the end.
Okay.
But if not, you're making my kids' day because they're going to be on YouTube now.
Oh, that's great. Well, I hope you guys feel better soon.
Okay.
All right, everybody say bye.
Bye, kids.
Bye. That's cute.
That is cute.
All right, so I guess we're talking about The Matrix.
Yep.
I don't really have an intro prepared. That's our intro, I guess. And I should have asked them if they've seen The Matrix.
I was going to say you should have them try to say like something about like take the blue pill or the red pill. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not, this is why I'm not, I need to, you know what, Chuck? I need to spend like 2 years at UCB.
Why?
I bet if I spent 2 years at UCB, or maybe just a summer at UCB, my podcasting skills would skyrocket like significantly. Like they would just improve significantly. I think they would.
Maybe you should do that. Maybe you should take some improv classes.
I should find like one of those.
You have a college really close to you. I'm without a doubt there's an improv group at that college.
I'm sure there's like a comedy school out here in the country that books Mexican restaurants.
You should do it. It would be awesome.
You know, that's how Will Ferrell got his start. Did I ever tell you about that? Like, did you ever hear about that?
I feel like I have, but remind me.
Mark, he was on Mark Maron talking about it, and like his very first foray into comedy was he went to like some really cheap comedy school where it was like some dude in a classroom in a high school and like 5 people, and he teach him how to do stand up. And the first time doing stand up was at a Mexican restaurant.
That's awesome.
And he said all he did was hum the Star Trek theme, the original one.
His penchant for weird comedy began.
Yeah, but we're not here to talk about Will Ferrell.
No, we are here to talk about the truth.
We're here to ask the question, what is The Matrix?
Unfortunately, no one can be told what The Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
Because that's what everybody was asking in March 1999.
It's true. The trailers are very vague and very enticing.
Yeah. So let's go back. Let's start off by getting a little nostalgic. What was it like when you first saw The Matrix and first heard about it? And what was it like for you, Chuck, when you were a kid and it was starting?
It was 1989. I was 16 years old. I remember I had a small Emerson television in my bedroom that was almost always set to ABC because I spent most mornings waking up to Good Morning America, except for those times where I late at night would switch it over to Comedy Central so I could watch The Daily Show and South Park and stuff like that without my mom knowing. But I remember seeing these commercials, these ads for this movie asking, what is the Matrix? And it was just really quick, montage of shots. I remember they showed the shot of someone jumping over a building, and they showed like our Trinity doing her flip thing, not the flip. I don't remember if the flip kick was in, or the bullet time kick or whatever, but there was the trailer is just this really quick cut thing showing like all this just craziness, asking what is the Matrix? And I decided that's intriguing. Like I kind of want to check that movie out. And then my buddy Josh had apparently gone to see it. I didn't really pay much attention when the movie was coming out. It's just one of those movies I was like, I'll check it out at some point.
Yeah.
And I was driving with Josh somewhere, and he goes, bro, you have to see this movie, The Matrix. I'm like, oh, I saw the previews for that. He's like, dude, you have to see this. He's like, I saw it earlier today. Like, we're going back tonight to watch this movie. I was like, okay. And because he's like, I can't explain it to you. He says, he's like, it's in the future, but it's also today. And he's like, it's just the craziest thing. Like, you have to see this. It's like, all right. And so we go and see it that night. And it was like his second time at the first, and it blew my mind. I remember he thought it was the funniest thing that when, at the end of the movie, when Neo gets shot,
yeah,
I like let out an audible swear of some kind. Like, I think I yelled, it was his bullshit in the theater. And he was like, I was so into the movie.
Yeah.
And then I got into the movie in the sense of like, I wore a lot of black and stuff afterward. So, which set me up for my career as a priest where I wear black all the time. Mm-hmm. So,
you do often look like Neo from The Matrix Reloaded.
It's true, because I do wear the cassock, which he wears in Matrix Reloaded. Yeah. So that was my introduction to the Matrix. Was I saw it within the first few weeks of it being out, and was completely and utterly blown away by what I was seeing on the screen. Just like being a somewhat of a, we've joked that I'm a weebo. So having these like anime kung fu film things and action movies, and just to see it all kind of mashed together into this science fiction thing was just like tailor made for where I was
right
as a person, especially in the year 1999.
Yeah. I have a very different...
the religion stuff. Can't forget the religion stuff.
Oh, of course. The symbolism. Yeah. Which, it's funny. None of that occurred to me until like a few years later. But yeah, that's also very significant.
And we'll need to talk about that because it did foster a cottage industry of really attempts at being a hip Christian books on like the gospel according to the Matrix and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yes. And I just remember like Christian radio using so many Matrix sound bites and their advertisements and stuff.
Yes.
Especially that you've been born into bondage, like the whole thing.
Which is messed up because it's Gnostic, but we'll get into that.
Yeah. So, my story is kind of interesting because it's very different. I was pretty stoked about it, like everybody else was. Like I first heard about it, the very first teaser that dropped was during the Super Bowl, and that was the first one I saw, and I was like, what the heck is this? I recognized Keanu Reeves naturally.
Of course.
And I remember it was one of like I think it was like one of the first movies to advertise a website.
Right.
And the website was whatisthematrix.com. And I remember going on my IBM piece of crap and like it just would not load ever. And so I'm trying to check this out and it's not loading. And I just remember I was just like counting down the days. I was a big I think I was 1999. I was 15 years older when it was coming out, going on 16. And I just became like a big movie nerd, and I had my big movie nerd friends, and we all loved action movies. We all love sci-fi and horror, and so like this is like right up our alley. And we were just counting down the days. I even put on my calendar on on the day that the movie came out, what is the Matrix?
Nice.
I remember recording VHS, using my VHS to record like ET behind the scenes. Oh no, it was MTV that did like a behind the scenes special. And what's funny is that like I had the captions on for some reason, and every time they would say Neo, it came out Neil.
That's funny.
And so for the longest time, I thought before seeing the movie, I thought Neo's name was Neil. Because
if you still had that, you could make like that would be so meme-tastic.
Yeah, and you know, people don't understand. Like back then, these TVs weren't great, so like the audio wasn't great either. So I even heard Neil sometimes, like the part where, because they would show the part often where Neo would say, "My name is Neo," when like Agent Smith is holding him in the subway, and I always heard, "My name is Neil." I'm like, yeah, Neil.
It's kind of like that knockoff toy that I've seen before. It's Robert Cop instead of RoboCop.
Yeah. Neil, the chosen one.
I wish we had more lead up time for promoting this episode, because I would totally make that an Animoji character.
Wake up, Neil. The Matrix has you.
Knock, Neil.
Wow. Anyway, so that was a big misconception on my part. And then the movie came out, and so 15 years old, none of us are 17 years old yet. It used to be a thing where the West Oaks Mall, they dropped us, the parents would drop us off at the West Oaks Mall. Yeah.
You saw it at the West Oaks Mall?
No, I did not see it at the West Oaks Mall. That's part of the story.
I saw it at the West Oaks Mall.
So we went opening night at the West Oaks Mall.
Okay.
But we were under 17. It's rated R. They back then, I don't know if they're like strict about it now. Back then it was like, no, if you were under 17, you're not getting into this theater. But we tried so hard. We bought tickets for 10 Things I Hate About You. And because they came out the same day. And we tried sneaking into the theaters, like their big theater. And I guess there were like multiple doors, and we kept trying to go into every single door. We kept getting stopped by ushers at every door. And eventually, yeah, we had to, I don't know what we did. I think we saw The Siege. I don't remember. I don't know.
That come out at the same time. That would be hilarious.
I think it was just out in theaters, either The Siege or like, I think also The Mod Squad was still out.
Oh, nice.
One of those movies. I forgot what we saw, but it was a huge letdown on our part. And we told our parents about it. And one of our parents was gracious enough, like, okay, well, we'll take you to see it tonight. And so they took us to the Movie Co. and what's it called, Chuck? FAO Schwartz.
Oh, and Point Orlando.
Point Orlando, yeah.
Yeah, Point Orlando. Yep.
So that's where I saw The Matrix. And
nice.
You know what's funny is when I saw it, I didn't really like it.
It'd been hyped. Too much hype.
I guess so, because, maybe it's just a couple years earlier, I saw Blade in theaters, and the part where Blade catches his sunglasses, and I don't know if it was hormones, but like I wanted to get out of my seat and just fight everybody. And I was kind of waiting for that to happen in The Matrix, and it didn't happen. And so I'm like, this movie sucks. But my friends, their minds were like blown. Like everyone around me was like enjoying every minute of it. I mean, I was enjoying it. I thought it was cool and stuff, but I wasn't like, this is the greatest movie ever. My mind was not blown. It wasn't like seeing Star Wars for the first time, like how everybody else kind of describes it,
Yeah.
And I remember just being in the car, everyone was talking about it, and I finally chimed in and was like, Blade was better. And they're like, shut up, JP. No, it wasn't. It's like, yeah, it was. So was Face Off. Face Off was better too.
The movie with the guy in the black leather jacket that fights vampires is better than the movie in the black leather jacket who shoots guards with guns.
Yeah. But it definitely it grew on me, especially when it came out in VHS. When that movie came out in VHS, I feel like it kind of gained more popularity. Like it was kind of a phenomenon when it hit theaters. But like when it went on VHS, like I just remember everyone making copies and just passing them around, and everyone having viewing parties, and everybody like watching it multiple times, memorizing everything. That's when I got really into it.
Yeah, I think it was among the No, I was gonna say it wasn't the first DVD. I had a DVD player by the time it came out, but I had it on DVD. I never had it on VHS. But yeah, when it came out on home video, it totally took on a whole new life. And it's one of those movies, like, as you said, the marketing was one of the first attempts at sort of viral internet marketing.
Yeah.
And so it didn't have that. So it really built on a type of word of mouth that like you said, it probably didn't do all. I don't remember it doing it that well in theaters. I don't think it was even in theaters that long.
I don't remember. I think it did pretty good. I should have done my numbers. I think it did well. It definitely, I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was a pretty big success, but I just remember like it becoming, it's like the only thing anyone ever freaking talked about when I was on VHS.
Right. I do remember though that it gained a degree of notoriety about a month later, because a month later was the Columbine shooting, and everyone made a big deal of the fact that those kids wore trench coats. And they were trying to claim that they were inspired by The Matrix to do what they did. Yeah,
and The Matrix's soundtrack didn't help any either.
Right.
Which had like Marilyn Manson and Rammstein and Rage Against the Machine and all the bands that the Columbine kids hated.
Right, but people said they loved. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did love Rammstein. Sorry.
And now he's a priest. So yeah, I definitely grew on me. And then when I started going to Christian school, that's when I learned about all this. That's when everyone was starting talking about like the religious symbolism and stuff and the philosophical things like that. So now as an adult, Chuck, what do you think about The Matrix?
Kane and I were like, we're just going to watch this like not too long ago. We just decided on a whim to watch it, and it holds up. Like I really like the movie. I mean, there are some issues that I have with it in the sense of like the justifying of mass killing as sort of collateral damage in the movie. But I am definitely of the camp that feels, well, I was going to say that I feel like the sequels ruin it, but I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. I'd have to think more about it. But the first movie is so solid and so good and sets itself up in such a way that the sequels were inevitably going to be a letdown. Mm-hmm. But I just, in terms of, watching it without seeing it with, trying to keep in mind, how much it was ripped off, how much it was parodied, how much all of that.
I was listening to a podcast that was talking about The Matrix, and I heard someone say something that I thought was really interesting. When The Matrix came out, if you were making like a sci-fi action movie, you had two choices. You're either going to do what The Matrix did, or you were not going to do what The Matrix did.
Right.
Those were the only two choices.
Yeah, I mean, and it gave us a bunch of. I mean, there was so many Matrix ripoff movies, like Ultraviolet, which is awful, and I
don't think those Underworld movies would have happened if it wasn't for The Matrix.
True, Underworld. What else is there? There's
the Resident Evil movies, even.
Yeah, there's definitely an element there. But I'm thinking of what's that movie with Christian Bale and the gun kata?
Equilibrium.
Equilibrium, which is complete ripoff of The Matrix.
Equilibrium is like,
even though it came out before, didn't it?
No, it came out after.
It did. Okay,
it came out a few years after. Equilibrium is like, it's the college dropouts The Matrix. Like, no, this one's smarter, dude. No, this one's way more deeper. Like.
They invented a martial art that involves guns. Okay. Yeah. I still think it's a great movie, and it holds up really well. And I'm still amazed at what they accomplished with, a fairly modest budget. Yeah. When all is said and done, and to think of, just the fact that we live in a world of reboots and remakes, for something to be just so wholly original as The Matrix. Even though it's in some ways, it's the kind of movie that could only be made because Tarantino was successful with Pulp Fiction, because they're kind of operating on similar levels in terms of drawing on different resources and then kind of throwing them in a blender and seeing what comes out.
It's also like Star Wars.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You're kind of borrowing not necessarily tropes, but just sort of like visual style and certain elements from different pop culture stuff, and not just movies, but also like comic books and anime and.
Well, and I would say but I would say that I would say that Star Wars is more of a, you know, it's cinematic. It's not purely borrowing from a cinematic place. It's borrowing from, you know, the work of Moebius. It's working, you know, from French science fiction comics. It's also drawing from like the old like Flash Gordon serials and things like that. Whereas I feel like The Matrix is drawing exclusively from various types of cinematic genres, like clearly anime and Hong Kong films, as well as, you know, 80s action movies,
film noir.
Oh yeah, because I mean, I saw a couple years later. I checked because I heard it was an influence on it. I decided to check out Dark City.
Oh yeah,
which is a very noir film.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see where the influences were there. I know.
Yeah,
I know
a lot of people. Yeah,
and I say a lot of people also claim that Ghost in the Shell was pretty much ripped off a lot for The Matrix.
Ghost in the Shell and Akira are kind of claimed to both be pretty big influences.
Yeah, which I'd never seen Ghost in the Shell. Had I seen it? No, I had seen it by that point. Sort of in passing. Of course, I'd seen Akira a couple times by then as well. So it's totally in my wheelhouse. And like I said, I think it's a movie that still holds up really well. And I think that what they do in terms of practical effects are amazing. Bullet time is still an amazing special effects convention that they came up with. And it's something that it was so theirs that anyone else using it is completely like,
no one ever does it the same way. Like it's like, you know, I think Alex Proyas, who directed Dark City, by the way, who kind of everyone sort of claims like the big conspiracy is that The Matrix completely ripped off Dark City, by the way. But Alex Proyas, who directed Dark City, went on to direct a movie called I, Robot. And there is so much influence for The Matrix. And you can tell there are parts where it's like, okay, how can we top bullet time? And it's like, you're not even getting bullet time right.
Right. Well, even then, like even the bullet time technique wasn't even used properly in the Matrix sequels.
Like I'm trying to think of like which scenes you're talking about. I don't remember what.
Well, because like bullet time as it shows in the original in the first Matrix film. So like when Keanu, you know, does the backwards.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's not that. Yeah. And then of course Trinity's famous, you know, her flying kick. You know, they had suspended both of these people in a green room, and they had surrounded them with still photo cameras, and so it was a collection of still images taken. Whereas later they developed a camera, like a single camera that went around on a track in order to make that happen. And so it's a slightly different technique, I think, and it just doesn't look the same.
Yeah, more CGI too, because I'm thinking of the scene on the freeway chase that makes it Matrix Reloaded when the two trucks collide together.
Right.
That's definitely supposed to be like a bullet time sequence, and it's like it's not really the same. It doesn't really doesn't look realistic at all.
No, even though that sequence is probably the best part of that whole movie.
Yeah, I love that. I love that chase.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good.
When Morpheus pulls out that katana and he slices a freaking car in half,
the Escalade, and he pulls out the Uzi and he blows up the car, and it blows up. Yeah,
so awesome. I will also say of when we're talking about sequences, I'm of the camp. You know, you're talking about, you know, when you interact with other people and their reaction to the movie, and yours was different than others. Mine was, I never understood the whole, like, so many of my friends were much more in, they said the best sequence in the movie was the Kung Fu sequence where Morpheus and Keanu fight, or Morpheus and Neo fight in the dojo. Right. And like my favorite sequence of the whole movie is the lobby shootout. Like that will always be my favorite sequence of the movie.
I think I've seen when it came out of VHS, and I owned it on VHS, I've probably seen the lobby shootout more than I've seen most movies. I'm pretty sure I've still owned The Matrix somewhere, and I'm pretty sure that scene just does not exist anymore on that copy, on the VHS copy.
It's because it's just been so.
It's not even snowy. It's just black because I've just worn it out so much. So yeah, I think I like that scene too, Chuck. Yeah. It is great, and like I mean, if you go back and you watch behind the scenes footage, like it's all practical. So like they had to rebuild the whole thing after so many takes,
right?
You know, but it is it's so good. So I don't know if you want to keep going about your thoughts on the movie.
I mean, what do you where are you going, JP? What's next on the agenda for you to talk about this movie?
Well, I kind of want to talk about just like what it means to you.
Okay.
And sort of now that we've had it for 20 years, and the Wachowskis have been saying for years, you know, I remember or at least they haven't been saying this. I remember them saying quite some time ago is like somebody asked them, well, you know, they're kind of famous for not telling anybody like what anything means.
Right.
And you kind of have to sort of parse it out yourself, which is possible. You know, the breadcrumbs are there. And somebody asked them once that, like, you know, do you think anyone will ever figure the whole thing out? And they're like, nope. Because they're just like, has anyone caught all the symbolism? They're like, nope.
Wow.
So, and I think that's interesting. There's just so many layers to it. And I think something that's always kind of turned me off about, not about the Matrix, but about the sort of this discussion is people keep comparing it to like, oh, it's just dorm room philosophy. I'm like, no, it's not. There's so much more to this movie than just the philosophical concepts and the sort of the Joseph Campbellian mythological concepts and the genre concepts. There's also, I think that now that we know that, you know, the Wachowskis are trans women,
right?
I think that movie takes on a whole new meaning. And I noticed the subtleties that I was watching it last night, and there's a scene when Neo meets the Oracle that just jumped out at me, that nobody talks about in this movie. It's just that the movie is so much about identity and figuring out who you are in a world that will probably reject you.
Right.
And the part that kind of spoke to this when I was watching the Oracle scene was when he was talking to the Oracle, and she tells him to look at the words above her door. And it's the Latin words. I forgot what the Latin phrase was, but it means "know thyself." And she tells him to that after she asks him, "Do you think you're the one?" And he's like, "I don't know." And she said, and you know, she points to the "know thyself" quote, and she says, "Knowing you're the one is being the one is all like being in love. You'll just know when it happens." And I thought that was interesting because I never connected these dots because Neo doesn't fully become the one, or at least embrace the fact that he's the one, until Trinity tells him that she loves him. And it kind of, which is interesting. I don't know how kind of, you know, how it goes with, you know, what I'm trying to parse with the movie being about identity. But I just thought that was interesting. That's something that kind of stuck out to me. And I don't know. What do you think, Chuck?
I mean, I've never really been super comfortable with the whole like love subplot of that movie, but I just always thought it was kind of corny.
Yeah, because it feels like it's undeserved. It's not that developed. Probably, right?
Right. I mean, but within terms of like, but at the same time, like the idea of someone finding their identity through as a result of being loved by and embraced by the Trinity is a very Greek, Eastern Christian kind of thing. The idea that, because in that is there's a doctrine of the Trinity known as perichoresis, which is often described as the dance of the Trinity. And the idea is that the three persons of the Trinity are constantly giving and receiving from each other. And so that movement of giving and receiving, all of creation gets sort of swept up in that. And so basically we are always embraced by the Trinity. Most of us just don't ever realize it. And so the idea of, there is a theological, an Eastern theological piece that could go with that. And that basically when that sense of accepting being embraced by the one who made you, or by the, you know, the Trinitarian being or whatever, like that sense of accepting that, embracing it, your identity then doesn't matter, because the person that the Trinity is all that matters. The Trinity is what embraces you. And so it does anything else, who cares? Because that's the most important thing.
You know what's interesting? Did you watch it on Blu-ray DVD when you watched it?
I watched it on DVD.
You should have listened to the Cornell West commentary.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if anyone who's listening to this and you're thinking about revisiting The Matrix, check out the DVD or the Blu-ray, and there's a commentary with the Wachowskis don't do a commentary. There's 2 commentary tracks. There's a commentary track with Cornell West and another philosopher. I forgot his name. And the other commentary track are some film critics who hated the movie. That was the Wachowskis' plan. The film philosophers who loved the movie and film critics who hated the movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so Cornel West is one of them. And as you know, Chuck, and as people on this podcast probably know, Cornel West is he's my boy.
Yeah.
I listened to this actually they do commentary for all 3 movies, and it completely just like opened my mind when I listened to these guys talk about these movies. And so what they talked about in terms of Neo and Trinity, and even Morpheus, is that they kind of sort of embody 3 very important characteristics. Morpheus embodies dogma. Neo embodies salvation, I think. It's been a while since I listened to it, but I think that's what it is. And Neo embodies, Trinity embodies love.
Mm-hmm.
And that Neo is supposed to be a messiah figure. But the reason why, it kind of, the peculiar thing about Neo as a messiah figure is that in order for someone to be a messiah, as in a savior, they have to love humanity. But he doesn't really kind of signs of loving humanity.
Mm.
He does things because he believes it's the right thing to do. Choosing to save Morpheus, and because he's been endeared to them,
right?
But because of like who Trinity is, by him loving Trinity, that is sort of like his way of like loving the world, because that's who she represents, and that's like their relationship. Is that love aspect? I don't know how much that tracks for you.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that
he
cares about the people who are enlightened is kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah,
he tends to, but he's a very reluctant messiah. Especially you see that especially in the sequel. But he's that sense of freeing people because it's the right thing to do, instead of out of love, because he has no real interpersonal connections with anyone in the movie until you get to Morpheus and Trinity.
Right.
He has no friends that you can tell. He hates his job, and is just sort of an isolated individual who is just sort of searching for answers. And which by the way is the one piece that I wish the movie did a little bit more, is I'd love to know a little bit more about Neo before the movie.
Yeah.
Like what prompted him to start looking for Morpheus? What made him think that this guy might have answers? He
was working at a software company, and his girlfriend took him to a therapist, and the therapist had a heart attack, and
Office Space is a prequel. Not that I need a prequel, but I just one of those things I'm kind of interested in. And yeah, I mean, it's also one of these movies that, I mean, there's stuff in it that I still think of to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole bit about where the Oracle tells Neo not to worry about is it the vase that he breaks?
Yeah. She says, don't worry about the vase. She's like, what vase? And he turns around and knocks it over.
And then she says, now would you have broken if I hadn't said anything?
Yeah, we'll really bake your noodle. She said.
Which is, I think about that crap all the time. There's not weekly. I think of the fact that there is a philosophical concept out there, and that it exists, that because that's something that what's his name? Kierkegaard, Søren Kierkegaard would talk about, is once an idea is put into your head, like you have to engage with it, right? And it's not there until it's there. And so when even someone says, don't do this, now suddenly you're like, oh, well, I wasn't aware I wasn't supposed to do it at all, but now I kind of have to.
Yeah, it's kind of also sort of the core of the movie, right? Like, would Neo have become the one if Morpheus hadn't told him anything?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah, which is the core of the first movie. You realize by the end of the second movie that's not the case. But which, by the way, I'm one of the few people who love the whole scene with the architect in the sequel.
I do too. I love them. I love the sequels. I think they're great. I like them. That's my personal opinion. People hurt me.
No, I'm not going to hurt you. I mean, the jury's out for me on the sequels. I think I think story wise, there's some cool stuff with it. I think effects wise, they got too self indulgent. The scene in Reloaded with all the Agent Smiths just becomes just a really ugly, obviously CGI fest that is not good.
Right. But I love the Oracle scene. I don't know what it is about that scene because it to me, like, I was watching it last night and I remember watching kind of like, okay, I know this part. I know what I can say about that. I know what I can say about this. But two scenes that really stuck out to me, I'm like, I'm kind of looking at this from a different angle now. It was the scene where Morpheus fights Neo in the dojo, and the part where he meets the Oracle. And I think it's because both scenes are sort of like an exchange of ideas. The dojo scene is not just it's not just a training montage,
right?
It's Morpheus trying to free him, and Neo almost sort of deliberately, like, you can't. No, I told you, no one can control me. Right? Because if you watch, Neo doesn't land a single punch during the whole fight, except for at the end where he stops with his fist in front of Morpheus's face, and he says, "I know what you're trying to do." And I've started to interpret that as like, you're trying to control me, just like how I've always been controlled by the Matrix. And he's like, "No, I'm trying to free you." And so I think there's sort of kind of like a struggle back and forth with that scene. It's sort of also kind of advancing the narrative.
Right. And I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, the whole movie deals with the question of freedom.
Yeah.
And what degree and to what degree we are free. I mean, that's the whole trilogy is really about that. And again, like, these are the kinds of things I still think about every single day, about all the little, sort of chaos theory, little things that mount up. Even people who say they're trying to free you are trying to not free you.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. We kind of learn in like the sequel is that even like the whole idea of the one is a system of control. Like,
right.
So
yeah, because it was a fraction. It was like a coding error that they've had to account for.
An anomaly.
Yeah. And so, yeah, the idea that they've just sort of, this happens every so often. So we know what we have to do to account for it.
Yeah.
I will say the movie didn't affect me nearly to the extent that like Truman Show did, which came out roughly around the same time.
Oh yeah.
In terms of like questioning reality. I know I had some friends that were sort of like, "Oh, we're really trapped in the Matrix. How do we know that we're?" They took it to that level. And for me, the Truman Show blew my mind way more. Really? In terms of, and maybe that says a lot about my personality, that I think I'm the star of a TV show rather than just another drone trapped in a. But I know, like, I remember my friend Josh, after we saw it, he said, "Dude, how do we know that the Wachowskis who made this, how at the time, the Wachowski brothers, like, how do we know, like, who are these people? We've never heard of them before. And this movie comes out of left field. How do we know that they don't know and they're trying to free us? This is their way. They're trying to free us from the Matrix."
Which is like, I mean, it's so, it's funny.
Right.
But also, like, when I think about the Wachowskis and what they were probably going through when they were making this, like, that is what they were thinking, like, that they need to be freed.
Right.
Right. And that's why, like, the movie takes on like this whole dimension for me.
Right. They just need to take their special medicine in order to be the person they were made to be.
Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
That's kind of an interesting thing, right? Like, it's like, here's your hormone pills, or here's the drugs that you take in order to keep yourself numb. Which one do you want to take?
Exactly. And I think there's stories, I don't want to like get anything wrong, but I think it was Lana who said that she was contemplating suicide before they started production of the movie. And I think it was, I think she was like in a subway station and was thinking about throwing herself in front of a train. And I think that's where the idea of Neo in front of the train came from.
Interesting.
Which is interesting because in a way, like in from a trans perspective, Agent Smith is dead naming Neo because he keeps calling him Mr. Anderson.
Right.
Which, dead naming is when you call a trans person by the name that they sort of abandoned instead of the name that they've adopted.
Right. Like calling Caitlyn Jenner Bruce Jenner, like calling her Bruce instead of
Caitlyn. Yeah. And it's usually very much intentional.
Right.
And it triggers a dysphoria. And that's it's like the movie kind of blew my mind again, which is interesting because it's almost kind of took on sort of like a Disney aspect because these movies are so much about identity.
Right.
About finding yourself. I never thought of The Matrix as finding yourself. I thought of it as like apotheosis, about becoming God. And I guess there's still an element to that. Like I think that I don't think there's like any one way to look at The Matrix. I definitely don't think the Wachowskis think that either. But there's like, it's like a prism, you can look at it from like a billion different ways, and like each way is like, because I think they looked at it from the same way too. It's like there's just like a bunch of different layers and a bunch of different narratives going on all at the same time.
Well, this touches a little bit on an episode I know that we want to do, which is the concept of authorship.
Yeah.
And who owns a story, right? And so like there's layers in there because of these people and the experiences that they were going through when they made this movie. But those experiences that's not necessarily what the movie is about, because as a viewer, we also experience things and see things that they may not have noticed when they were creating it. And so it's there for us to analyze as well from our own perspectives. And that's one of the things that I think is interesting about the evangelical Christian like gravitating toward this movie, like
almost appropriating, if you want to use that.
Yeah, no, totally. Because I mean, and like I said, it revealed a lot to me in the years that I've reflected on it. It's revealed a lot of what I think has gone wrong with evangelical Christianity.
You think so?
Yeah, because the movie is fundamentally Gnostic, and the idea that there is an unchecked Gnosticism in evangelicalism. Because evangelical Christianity's narrative, as we understand it today, is that God cares about where your eternal soul is going to go, and that this material world is destined for burning and destruction after the result of the rapture. And so the idea that the world is temporary, I mean, I had pastors growing up who would say that. It's like, I don't care about this, this is all temporary.
Yeah.
That of course is fed into politics and other things, like in economics and other things. But the idea then that if the world is fundamentally a world really where the spirit is true and the flesh is false, that's a Gnostic world. And so the idea that evangelical Christians would gravitate to this message that basically says everything that you see around you is a lie.
Yeah.
And that you need to deny the lie in order for there to be freedom.
Yeah, I heard that a lot when I was a teenager, dude. And yeah, The Matrix is brought up a lot and kind of illustrating all of this.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, and I wonder on how this worked on two levels. Was it one, did people see that message affirmed their Christianity, in which case their Christianity is fundamental heretical and they just didn't realize that? Or was this one of those things of convenience where there was just enough symbolism that evangelical Christians seized on it for their evangelistic purposes, but without giving any kind of critical thought to the rest of the stuff. And so evangelicalism sort of morphed to fit this thing, that they carried the metaphor too far. I mean, I'm sure both things have happened.
I think there's sort of also an element of like, I feel seen.
Right.
It's sort of like a misinterpretation. I mean, that's how I felt anyway when I was a teenager. Like, oh wow, someone like is speaking about spirituality in a mainstream Hollywood movie. Like, it's justifying it if I feel validated,
Right, which allows it to also work. Right, then we've talked about it as a metaphor for the trans experience. We've it's kind of like how Frozen, like the movie Frozen, has become seen as a movie for people of sexual identities.
Right,
to like for like queer people to like see this movie as though this movie sees them. And the idea that that it's kind of interesting that trans people and evangelical Christians could have the same movie.
Yeah, overlapping. Awesome, love it.
But I do think that, like I said, I think there's some troubling. There's a troubling notion to that, because for Christians, and I think the Orthodox Christian view of the world is a healthy view of the world, which is that yes, the world is messed up and broken, but God is working to redeem it and not abandon it, and so you shouldn't abandon it either. Like, you know, you love it to the extent that God loves it, but you also kind of have to hold it at arm's length. I think is a much healthier view than it's all going to burn someday, so who cares?
Right.
And so but it's such a fascinating thing to me that a certain group of Christians would gravitate to this movie as though it like was their text.
Oh, I know.
You know? And yeah. And like you said, all the Z88.3 ads and the you know, I remember the book, The Gospel According to the Matrix.
Oh God.
Just everywhere, just everywhere. There were 2 or 3 books about like around that time that were basically riffs on the same concept. And that kicked off this whole cottage industry of books, like, you know, The Gospel According to the Simpsons, The Gospel According to, you know, whatever pop culture thing was out there. The Matrix was sort of the first movie to do that.
I think that the Matrix is sort of where it started, and then it peaked when the Da Vinci Code came out.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting, because the Da Vinci Code is another pro-Gnostic movie, and the way evangelical Christians responded to that was to argue against it.
Yeah, and they wrote so many books.
They wrote so many books, and I remember Carl Smith, who was one of my New Testament professors at Palm Beach Atlantic University. He worked as a scholar of the Gnostic writings and Gnosticism, but he was one of the few sort of conservative scholars of Gnosticism, and he was constantly getting pushback from a lot of the sort of mainstream Christian history stuff, because sort of so many people had just sort of taken for granted that the Gnostic writings were sort of indicative of a true form of Christianity that was suppressed. Right. Which, when you read the Gnostic writings, I don't know how you get to that, but because it's such a bizarre thing, Gnosticism. And anyway, I could go on and on that subject. But
we should do a Da Vinci Code episode. That would be a lot of fun.
Oh God, I've never seen that movie, and I'm really in no hurry to ever see it.
I read the book, and I was delightfully entertained throughout. Just because it's just so bizarre.
Yeah. I will say my thing about it is, the thing I just get so friggin' tired of is the conversation around, do Jesus and Mary Magdalene get married and have babies? Like, what a boring conversation.
I'd never been introduced to that conversation when I read it. Like I didn't know anything about Catholicism or anything like that, or anything about Gnostic texts or anything when I read it.
Well, and it's all fundamentally predicated on the Diatessaron, which was a Latin conflation of the 4 Gospels to try to force them into one story during the Middle Ages. And the Diatessaron makes 3 Marys into one character named Mary Magdalene. And so the only way that story makes any sense is if you assume that Mary of Bethany, Mary of Magdalene, and I can't remember the other Mary, but if they're all the same character, and they're not the same person in the Bible at all. Yeah, the woman caught in adultery. Yeah, if you think
that's not what Leonardo da Vinci says,
but yeah, but at the same time, you know, the Matrix, I think, was responsible for pushing. You know, we got the Da Vinci Code because the Matrix created this space for there to be religious. I mean, overtly religious stuff in a mainstream blockbuster. Yeah. And like weird religious stuff. Not like, you know, there is no altar call for Neo. You know what I mean? It's
yeah. I mean, the Christian iconography is I want to say subtle, like, but not that subtle, but subtle, but also sort of overshadowed by a bunch of other iconography going on.
Yeah, because there's a lot of Buddhist stuff in there.
Yeah,
and that's another thing. I mean, there's this other bit of there's a whole realm of liberal Christianity out there who sort of sees, you know, Jesus and Buddha as being one and the same, and and all that, which I learned originated from German theologians.
Isn't like that Jesus took like a field trip, or like Buddha took like a field trip to Israel or something? Like
there are some claims of that, but so a lot of that stuff entered into the academic circles because of German theologians, and German should perk our ears for a moment, because these were German theologians working in the 20s and 30s who were not considered Nazi war criminals, and so they were allowed to work in American institutes of higher religion. And so, but these were people that they were actively trying during like the whole Volkish thing of German identity, were trying to do anything to divorce Jesus from his Jewish roots. And so they pushed this idea that Jesus has more in common with Buddhism in order to distance Jesus from Judaism.
Jeez.
So when you hear people who think they're all enlightened saying this kind of stuff, just know those are Nazi ideas.
That's wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I wish we could talk about some of the other characters in the movie. We didn't talk about Cypher.
Oh, Cypher.
Played by Joey Pants, as he's known to be called, Joey Pantaleone. Yeah, who's kind of a go-to actor for the Wachowskis.
Yes, because he was in Bound.
Yeah, when their first actors work, he was in Bound, and I don't know. I can't remember if he was in like Jupiter Ascending or Speed Racer.
I need to see both of those movies.
You do. We need to talk. And yeah, those are like both two movies that we should be talking about on this podcast. Speed Racer is great. Jupiter Ascending, I need to see again.
Yeah.
That's something. But yeah, Cypher, interesting character. That's kind of one of those characters that's sort of like, you kind of call into question the idea of determinism. Like, is he playing a significant role in everything that's happening? Or like, I don't know. What do you think about Cypher as a character, Chuck? I'm interested in your thoughts on him. Like, is he supposed to be like, is he supposed to be Judas?
Totally. Yeah. And I think of Cypher every time I have a properly cooked steak.
I do too. Why didn't I take the blue pill?
But yeah, ignorance is bliss.
Yeah.
Cypher, the idea that his backstory is that he was picked because he was initially thought to be the one. I don't
know.
Yeah, I heard that. That's what I understand. The backstory is
really?
that
I didn't know that.
And then they realized he wasn't, because I guess the Oracle flat told him he wasn't or whatever.
That's interesting. Yeah, you wonder, like, what did the Oracle tell Cypher?
Yeah. But but it also plays into this kind of, there's this Gnostic thing where Judas was sort of told by God that this was the role he had to play.
Yeah.
And so is Judas really, if the crucifixion is necessary for the salvation of man, how can Judas be held responsible? Like, how can Judas be seen as a guilty person? And there's been a lot of stuff about that over the years, over the centuries. But yeah, so Cypher's totally a Judas character. Cypher is, the fact that he's willing to turn on these people that clearly cared for him, makes him a really wicked person. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's a secondary villain, obviously, to Smith.
Right.
I mean, he's a character. Like, I think it was. I don't know if it was just that goatee, but I just did not trust him from the get-go.
Bald with a goatee, classic comic shop guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and the fact that he's kind of like constantly belittling things, it's clear that Neo is picking up on the fact that there's something not right with him.
Yeah, it's this really skeezy crush on Trinity.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, what does that say about sort of like their roles, like the Judas character in love with the Trinity? But it's like kind of gross.
Yeah. Yeah. Layers.
Yeah. um,
And then there's Mouse.
Mouse. Oh, poor Mouse. He tried.
He tried. He created his little porn subroutine and died for it.
You know what I really love about this movie, and I kind of noticed while watching it last night. Just kind of just reel back for a minute from about just sort of the talk about philosophy and stuff and spirituality. I love the structure of it because there is so much time devoted to just like explaining everything and getting people into the world and the concepts. And it's like, it's so heavy and it's so like, what? And you would think like, man, we're going to lose them if we just keep going down this direction. But the third act kicks in and it's like, okay, this is where it gets fun.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, like that was a shootout.
Yes.
Like it's shootouts, it's kung fu, it's helicopter chases, it's explosions. It's like, it's just like probably the most glorious payoff in action cinema.
Yes.
Just the most glorious spectacle of payoffs.
Yes, without a doubt. And then it yeah, because you said it's all exposition and intro leading up to the third act. Yeah. And when Neo makes the choice to go back in and rescue Morpheus, it is nonstop till the end of the movie.
Oh, I know. At least up until about like, which is funny because Smith kills him. That's when the action pretty much ends.
Right.
all of that leading up to Smith kills him. And it's exactly what, the Oracle said would happen.
Right. Which is why you can understand why I exclaimed profanity in a movie theater when that happened.
Yeah.
Because like, it's just getting good and you kill the guy.
Yeah. And then
he comes back and it is badass.
And then Agent Smith accepts Neo into his heart.
True. Agent Smith has his altar call moment. It's true.
That's what salvation looks like, folks.
That's true. Yes.
I mean, that is sort of like what they make it out to be in the sequels, right? Because like because it's like, when that happened, he liberated Smith. I mean, Smith says that even though I'm liberated, but even though you've liberated me, you've taken away my purpose.
Right.
Because he's not supposed to be liberated.
Right. Which is interesting parallel. There's a story in the Bible, in the Gospels where there's this guy, it's in the Gospel of John. He's at the pool of Bethesda. And it's this crippled guy. He can't move his legs. He's lame from birth, it says. And there's this angel that stirs the waters every day, and people who touch the waters the first person to touch the water, get in the water, gets healed. And so this guy tries constantly to get into the pool of Bethesda in order to be healed, and it doesn't happen for him. And so Jesus comes along and heals the guy. And then the dude immediately runs and tells the Pharisees about, he says, here's the guy. Like and it's more than just sort of like, hey, here's good news. There's almost like here's a dude you're looking for. He's over here.
Yeah.
And it suggests, the way that I've interpreted the story in recent years, it suggests to me that similar thing to Smith, that sometimes we think we want to be liberated, but we don't know what liberation means. And so when liberation happens, it's sort of like, oh, I've defined my whole life by this particular struggle and this particular identity. And now that I'm free, I don't know what to do. Right. And so now I'm just going to get angry and lash out.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today, folks. We hope you enjoyed it. Go out and watch The Matrix again, and watch it with that Cornel West commentary track, and have your mind blown. Watch all three of them.
Yeah, and watch it, and maybe if you can, try to find someone who's never seen it before and watch it with them, because that's one thing I'd be curious to find is like, is this a movie that really hits us as Gen X Xennials? Is this like a thing that's really ours, or is it truly a timeless movie?
I'd be interested in knowing that too, because we've talked about how much has been ripped off. Would people even be surprised you know, when they watch it, would they be?
Yeah, would it just be sort of like spot the reference if they watch it?
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing, because that's how people feel. Like I've shown Raiders of the Lost Ark to people who have never seen it before. It's like I feel like I've already seen this movie, like well, it's influenced 40 years of action cinema. So yeah.
I also wonder about one thing we didn't touch on is the way that the ideas of them. I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but the ways the ideas of the Matrix have been perverted, like with the men's rights activists and all that kind of stuff. And I wonder how much of that has also impacted it in terms of its pop culture reception.
Yeah, that's such a bummer, because Matrix rules.
It does rule,
and like thing.
And if it's a metaphor for trans identity,
I know,
then that's kind of hilarious that these guys totally miss it.
Take it back. We're gonna take it back. Take it back for the MRAs.
That's right.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, remember to have a great week. Join us again next time, and good journey.
Good journey.
Cool.
What is the Matrix?